we had some comments come in, and I just wanted to correct an answer that I gave to Travis. So I apologize for not being clear. An education company wants to buy the rights to my book. I refused, so we are in negotiations for a licensing agreement. All right. So based on that context, then the question was, I am negotiating a license agreement with an education company for my book in which I own the copyright. I've tried to find sample agreements online, but have not had any luck. So the first question was around pricing and payment. So with a licensing agreement, it's all going to be dictated by the licensing agreement. So if there should be a clause somewhere in there that says how frequently they'll pay you. Something else that you might want to consider is an audit clause. In an audit clause, essentially what it gives you the right to do is within a certain period, you can audit the company's books, which basically means you have to hire a forensic accountant and they can go in and make sure that they've paid every penny that's owed to you. That's not a clause that you want to ever have to invoke, but it is something that can help keep them accountable. So I would check that. As far as like general advice, which I think that's what you're asking and kind of what you're looking for. The big thing, sounds like you made the right decision. I mean, you didn't sell the rights to your book. See, that's the mistake I think a lot of people make, that you didn't make that critical mistake. It is understanding that a book is not something that you sell. It is a bundle of rights. It's a bundle of different copyrights. So you're absolutely on the right path. Some things that I would think about as I think about like a contract from top to bottom is probably the first thing would be like a grant of rights. So what rights are you granting them? Is it ebook rights? Is it paperback rights? Is it hardcover rights? And then what language are you giving? I'm assuming it's going to be world English. Right. And then what is the length of the licensing agreement? So when you think about the grant of rights, I would think about formats, territory, and terms. So you want to limit the formats you're licensing, limit the territories you're licensing, and then limit the time duration. So don't give them the license for the life of your copyright if you can avoid that. If you do, make sure you ask for more money. All right. And then I would also think about making sure there's no like hammer clauses like do not compete clauses, or a do not compete clause would say that essentially you can't publish any books that compete with the publisher within a certain time period. That can hamstring your career, because if you license a book to them and then you want to write some more books under that same pen name, they would potentially be able to stop you from doing that. So I would pay very close attention to that and make sure that you don't hamstring your output in the future. Trying to think of some other clauses that would be helpful to be on the lookout for. Just be on the lookout for any rights grabs. Just sometimes there'll be clauses. I don't know about the education space, so just I'm speaking generally, but just make sure that there's. I always like to think about contracts as thinking about every clause coming back to haunt you. Like treat every clause as if it will be weaponized against you. And if you think about it like that, you'll think about it correctly. So, Travis, if you have any more specific questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. But I hope that cleared up the clarification. But typically with a licensing agreement, I would not, I mentioned getting paid every month. I would not expect to get paid every month. Typically with an agreement like that, you're going to be getting paid quarterly, maybe, a couple times a year, maybe annually. So that's why having that accounting clause is really important, and be thinking about different ways that you can validate whether the book is selling and where would be helpful to you as well, just so that just keep people accountable. Very Bad English asks, is there any way to change the spell check dictionary in Scrivener? I think it's the worst dictionary ever. Yeah, I think that it is based on the Mac OS dictionary, which it kind of sucks. Let's just be honest. I don't know of any way to do that. There is the option. I know some people are using Pro Writing Aid, so you can check that out. I've got an affiliate link if you're interested, authorlevelup.com/Pro Writing Aid. That integrates with Scrivener, kind of, not really, but it's a tool that I know some people are using, and Pro Writing Aid blows the pants off of anything that's installed on your computer. So I highly and wholeheartedly recommend Pro Writing Aid. That's a good program. All right, Wylan. This one is really bothering me. How the heck do you indent when typing on mobile? Um, Wylan, let me know. Are you using Scrivener iOS? If you are, there is a way to do it. It's in the settings somewhere. It's kind of nestled in the settings. I can try to figure that out. But let me know if it's in Scrivener, if that's what you're talking about. All right. Okay, Chloe Skylar B. Bella. How can someone stop being lazy as an author when working on a novel or a book? Sometimes it's overwhelming. Well, the key is to keep yourself motivated, and everybody has different strategies for keeping themselves motivated. My strategy is to pick the right projects for the right reasons. So, if you're procrastinating and if you're feeling lazy, it could be because you've chosen the wrong project, and that's your subconscious's way of telling you, I don't think you should be working on this right now, right? Because if you pick the project that brings you joy, that makes you laugh every time you sit down in the chair, then you'll find that it's so much easier to write. So much easier to write. The other thing to be aware of is just practice. If this is your first time at the rodeo, you've never been through the entire process of writing a novel. And I've talked about that all the time. And once you get through that process the first time, it gets 1,000% easier. But our brains tend to shut down and not want to do stuff that's hard. So if that's you, you got to find some strategies for coping and pushing through. Adrian, how do you revise your first draft? How do you revise your first draft? All right, so I would say there are two strategies. The first strategy is if you are a plotter. The second strategy is if you are a pantser. If you are a pantser, let's just start there. If you're a pantser, I would say what I like to do is edit as I go, and I will stop every 500 words, loop back to what I wrote, and then revise it. Write 500 words, loop back. Write 500 words, loop back. And I do that all the way throughout the novel until I'm done. And then at that point, I don't technically have a first draft. I kind of have a finished draft. So that's if you're a pantser. I talk about that in my book, The Pocket Guide to Pantsing. If you are a plotter, then I think it's a little bit different. So plotters tend to write multiple drafts. That's not true of everybody, but if that's you, if you write multiple drafts, what I would consider is editing in isolation. So if you are, say you write the first draft and then you need to go back, use tools like, if you're using Scrivener, it has a tool called Linguistic Focus, and you can basically fade in the dialogue, you can fade in the verbs, you can fade in the nouns, and I recommend editing things in isolation. So maybe take a few different passes at it. Look at the dialogue and then go back through and look at the action, the sentences that have action, and then go back through and look at the narrative. And if you do that, then it makes it easier, because then things start jumping out at you more, as opposed to just biting off the whole chapter and then trying to go through and edit. I just find, when I was writing multiple drafts, I found that making many passes and then focusing on one element with each pass and just going through it quickly, that helped me a lot. And then, taking breaks between each of those passes will also help keep your brain fresh. Because the big danger when you're editing is that your eyes start glazing over. And then when you start getting fatigued, you'll start off your session really strong, but then at the end of the session, you'll start to miss stuff. And that'll start showing up when you send the book to your editor. So taking breaks is really important. Okay. Felix Haley Keene official. I'm working on my superheroine novel series about my main female characters being clone child of two women. How can I write them well? I need help. Well, I would say there's no difference. It doesn't really matter on the character. Writing a character well, I think, is the same regardless of who the character is or what their background is. I think you can never go wrong if you sing the following song. Write as much as you can through the eyes of that character. Make the readers feel like they're inside the head of that character. And how you do it is the advice that Dean Wesley Smith gives all the time, which is write in the five senses. Bring in the five senses through the eyes of that character. That will ground the reader in the character's head. And then at that point, once they're grounded, then you can start doing all sorts of stuff. And they'll be along for the ride. So you can never go wrong when you sing that song. How do you get a literary agent? Honestly, I don't know. That's not a path that I'm interested in going down, Adrian. On this channel, we talk about self-publishing. I suppose if you were to start looking for a literary agent, you might want to go to like I don't know if Writers Market. I know Writers Digest Books does Writers Market books. I don't know if there's agents in there. There's probably websites and things. I think the key, again, I don't know very much about this world because that's just not my area, but I think the key is finding an agent that understands your genre and an agent that's not going to embezzle money from you, and somebody that's going to be fair with contract terms. Something that I would pay very, very close attention to. But good luck. All right. Travis asks, you have many series. In this lieu of writing is this in lieu of writing second editions to previous work? Just curious, currently contemplating adding to my book as a second edition versus writing a series. So the question is, do I write updated editions to my books or in a series? So Travis, I have some books. So my philosophy is when I write a book, that book just is. Like I will go back and make some updates. Like, for example, I have a book. It's called the Self-Publishing Advice Compendium. In that compendium, I happen to have, I think it was maybe a few lines about Smashwords and how Smashwords is a distributor that blah, blah, blah. Well, as we all know, or hopefully everybody knows on this call, Draft2Digital has acquired Smashwords. And so that paragraph was out of date. So immediately when I got that press announcement, I looked across all my books to figure out which, is there anything in my books that's out of date? And I found that in this book, I had some Smashword stuff. So I went in and updated it and just updated the edition, or not the edition, but updated the version. And then I re-uploaded it to all of the different retailers. Now, I did not change I didn't do an updated edition. That was just some updated content. So when I write my books, for the most part, they just are what they are, and I'll make some tweaks here and there. I have one book right now that does have a true edition in the sense of I think what you're referring to. That's my book, The Writing App Handbook. So that book is a book that I'll probably do every 3 to 5 years because things change in the market. And so I want to create an updated edition that reflects all of the changes. And I kind of just know, like I kind of knew going into it that it was going to be that way, and it would be something I'd have to update. I'm probably going to have to do the same thing with my writing estate author estate handbook. I don't know yet. We'll see. But I think the key to me is I think you just write the best book you can. And then if there is content down the road that you want to update it with, then I think you just have to make the decision of, is what I'm updating, does it constitute a new edition, or is it just something that I can update? Because if you do a new edition, you got to remember that that's technically a new book launch, right? And if you have ISBNs, that's technically another ISBN too. So there's a cost to doing true new editions. And then there's also the fact that people that bought that first edition, if they don't know that second edition is out there, you gotta find some ways to let your readers know about that second edition. So that's another issue I think that you have to think about. That's kind of why I like to just update stuff. And if you look at the copyright page of all of my books, you'll see there's a version on the copyright page. I keep track of all my versions. I've got a change log, and I know with every version what I updated with each book. So that way it helps me stay clear. But yeah, if you're going to do editions, another thing I would consider is making sure that you make it clear that there's an edition on the cover. So that way, if you do need to do another launch down the road, you can change the colors or you can change the design a little bit so that people know when they see it that it's an updated edition. So super long answer to your question, but hopefully that answers it a little bit. Wylan asks, is there anything that, as a reader, ever bothers you in other people's works every time you see it, even if it's not technically wrong? Yeah, sometimes. I mean, you can kind of tell when a writer doesn't do their due diligence, especially when you're writing a novel. If there's repeated sentences or just stuff that logistically doesn't make sense. I remember, gosh, I'm going to say there was a character that did something that was just completely illogical. Like the character went to the store to buy something that you just could not buy. Like it didn't make any sense. Like, yeah. So I sometimes I when I'm listening to audiobooks or reading a ebook, I can hear myself thinking, there's no way that's possible. But I still keep reading because, I have some grace for authors even when they make those mistakes, given that, I'm definitely not um, immune to making mistakes like that myself. You just kind of have to hope that you catch them all. That's why you want to find good editors and make sure you go over the manuscript as much as you can. But yeah, I mean, inconsistencies with stories is always one of the things that jumps out at me. All right. Travis, if a reputable publishing company offered you a contract, would you ever write a book for them at the expense of not owning your copyright? Is their marketing power worth it? Well, Travis, I think the true answer to your question lies in the last part of your question, which is the marketing power worth it? If you are a self-published author, you're expected to do everything. You have to do everything. You've got to write, do business, market. Every success is on you and every failure is on you. I think we all understand that. If you are a traditionally published author, you're still expected to do the majority of the marketing. The publisher can choose whether they give your book marketing push or not. And the reality is that the majority of the books that are published out of New York and other places are just not, they're not given that marketing push that we all think. We all see it. We see people on Good Morning America and all these other tours to go speak about their books. But the reality is not every author gets those opportunities. So at the end of the day, you're going to be expected to do the marketing too in order to make sales. And by the way, you're going to make a heck of a lot less than you would make if you had self-published it. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that sure, publishers have a reach. They have an easier time, maybe, if they want to get your book into bookstores. They have an easier time, if they want to get your book into other formats like audio or hardcover or maybe even, licensing translations and such. But, those are all things that you can do yourself too. And yeah, so anyway, to answer the first part of your question, if a reputable publishing company offered me a contract, would I ever write a book for them at the expense of losing my copyright? The answer is, I don't know. Probably not. They'd have to come to me with a sweetheart deal, because there's just some lines in the sand that I'm just not going to cross. The first line in the sand is I'm just not going to sign a do not compete clause. Like if I want to write 10 to 15 books a year, I'm going to write 10 to 15 books a year, and there's not a single amount of money that you can pay me to stop me from doing that. So I'm not going to sign a do not compete clause. That's just, don't even contact me if you're going to offer that in the contract. Second thing is, I'm not going to give away rights to formats that the publisher's not going to use. So if they're going to come to me with an offer, it needs to be very clear on what they intend to do with it and how they intend to do it. And I'm just not going to mess around with that. There's just a lot of the publishing contracts are difficult and they're tricky. Publishers have their reasons for including the language in the contracts the way that they do. And I don't begrudge that, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be part of that. Like, I don't want my copyright to just become a number on a publisher's balance sheet. That's not why I signed up to do this. So it'd have to be the right deal. It'd have to be the right terms. And, for me, if I write 10 to 15 books in a year, I can afford to make some decisions where, I'm either giving things away or strategically doing some marketing. I can afford to make those decisions because I write so many books. So, I'm not going to shut the door and say, no, I wouldn't do it, but it'd have to be the right deal. And typically the people that get those right deals tend to be the people that are already in the position to command those deals in the first place. And as somebody I mean, I have a brand name, but I don't have a Dean Koontz brand name. It's just unlikely that a publisher would, a reputable publisher would want to amend their boilerplate language unless I had a killer book. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I'm a big fan. My great grandmother used to always say never. So I'm not going to say never, but probably not. And Arjuna, I was reading and writing about a clinical condition I don't have. I'm not sure about being sensible while discussing some diseases like cancer. Yeah, that's always tough. You always have to tread a little carefully, but I think you definitely can do it. I mean, I like to listen to people's stories, like watch people's stories and read what they went through, and also the people in their lives that had to support them, and then also reading about some of the treatment and side effects and things like that. But usually when I refer to like a devastating illness like that, I'm usually referring to it in passing. So you kind of bypass that. You don't have to go around, or you don't have to go through describing everything. But if your character is dealing with it, then that's a different story. It requires a little bit more finesse. Yeah, Arjuna, you have an important comment here. As long as I'm respectful, nobody will be offended. But on second thought, I will avoid it in the future. Yeah, no matter what you do, there's going to be somebody that's going to be offended. There's just be prepared for that. There's nothing you can do. Like, your respectful is subjective. Your view of subjective is somebody else's, tripwire. So just be prepared for that. I mean, I think you just have to, you're obviously doing the research, right? So I think you just have to do the best you can, research it as much as you can. If you can, maybe talk to a few people, like in person or online, to get their experiences. Do the absolute best you can, release it out into the world, and come what may. And that's true of anything, whether you're writing about a medical illness, whether you're writing about a race of a person that you're not a part of, whether it's talking about life in another country. There's just no shortage of different areas where you can find yourself in unknown territory. And I just think you have to do the best you can, and you just know that there's gonna be somebody out there that's gonna hate your guts. But that's humanity. That's humankind, right? So good luck with that. All right, Wylan, what are your thoughts on movie show adaptations of your work, if you ever get a chance, if you ever had an offer? Well, I would love to talk to anybody in Hollywood or in TV who would like to make an adaptation of my work. I'm always open to that. I'm not going to ever shut the door on a TV show or a movie for any of my works, but the terms got to be right. I'm just not. I'm not going to sign some crappy contract that hamstrings the rest of my career. I have too much of a vision and too much of what I want to accomplish. And so if somebody wants to talk, I'm always going to talk, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to sign a contract. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that this is a business transaction. For a lot of authors, it's when they get those offers, it's like, oh my God, and then they stop thinking. You can't stop thinking when you get something like that, no matter how exciting it is, no matter how many zeros are behind the numbers. You've got to remain cool-headed. And how can you take an opportunity like that and use it to leverage future opportunities? Let me give you an example. So the franchise Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? I used to watch that all the time when I was a kid. Anyone who grew up in the 90s loved that TV show or the game show. And that inspired me to want to compete in my own geography or my school's geography bee and all that stuff. And if you look at that franchise, it's kind of masterful how they've mastered licensing copyright. So it began as a computer game, and everybody bought that. And then there were different spinoffs, Where in Time, Where in North Dakota, Where in Europe is Carmen Sandiego, all this stuff. And then they had a TV show. and the game show was so popular that they just poured gasoline on everything else. And so next thing you know, we're in the world of Carmen Sandiego books. There were T-shirts. There was the Rockapella album that came out that everybody loved, that everybody had in the 90s. And then you didn't hear about Carmen Sandiego for a long time. And now they brought it back. So they actually just brought it back. And my daughter, who's 7 years old, is hooked on the franchise. She got one of the interactive caper novels and absolutely loved it, is watching the series on Netflix. So when I think about like offers, like to go back to your question, Wyland, when I think about offers that come to me, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about how whatever offer is sitting in front of my table or sitting in front of me on the table, how is that going to help me with the next phase of my career? So you almost have to look a little bit further past the actual offer and think about what it actually means for your career. Because to me, I would love to make a television show, not because I want to see my name on the marquee of a television show. I want to do it because I know how many books it's going to help me sell as a result. So anyway, if you think about that, you'll do it correctly. I'm long-winded today. I don't know what it is. Christina, how do I stop overthinking my writing? I've been trying to just write without worrying so much, but lately I can't shake the fear that I'm doing everything wrong. Very good question, and an important question. So you feel like you're overthinking the novel. You feel like you're worrying about making a misstep. So I would ask, where is this coming from? You know, where is it coming from? Christina, I think you've been in my community for a while. I would be curious how many books you've written. Is there like was there something that happened with like a review, or did a reader say something? Like, why is it that you're doubting yourself? You know, and I think you have to be honest with yourself when you ask that question of why is it you're feeling that way? Because there's some root cause. I don't know what that cause is, but there has to be some root cause to make you feel that way. And I would say, you know, when I talk to people, I always try to be sensitive to like what people are dealing with, right? Because in some respects, it could be that you're feeling the way you feel because there's just you just need to motivate yourself, and there's some things that you need to do, you know, on your work on yourself that you need to do to stop feeling that way. And I try to give as many strategies and tools and things to help people with that. But on the other end, there's also the fact that you have to kind of be sensitive to it, and that sometimes you can't turn your brain off. I mean, sometimes when you're overthinking things or you're worrying about things, you can't necessarily turn it off. And that's something that requires a little bit more intervention. So I want to know what that, or you don't have to tell me. I don't want to say that but I just want to be curious to what that root cause is. If it were me and I was overthinking something and I was constantly worried about making a mistake, what I would do is I would push out the work as soon as I could. You know, whatever anybody else thinks, it doesn't really matter. I would do it just for my own self-preservation and dignity. I would just get the work done, even if it's not perfect in your eyes, publish it, because you never know what people are going to think about it until you actually publish the book, right? And I think that's really, really important. All right. So yeah, Christina, I would just think about that and just make sure that just find the root cause. I think that's important. So let me see here. Okay. Yeah, I know I gave a super long and windy answer. I've talked to a number of people over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And I want to call out that there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. I mean, it's just stuff is really heavy right now. And there's a lot of people that, you know, if you feel like you just can't write, I mean, it's not, I don't know, you're not alone. But yeah, just think about it. I would be curious. You're welcome to write me in confidence if you want on my contact form. be happy to brainstorm through some other strategies with you if you want, Christine. Okay. Travis, you're so thorough in your answers and comments. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Wyland, I love Carmen Sandiego. Yes, I do too. And I'll tell you something. I really like the new series that's on Netflix now. I at first I was like, I don't know about this, but actually I think it's a really really good use of the franchise. Like it takes it in a direction that I didn't expect, but that I actually really like. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. The animation is a little weird. I wasn't crazy about the animation, but I actually am liking it quite a bit. All right. Travis says, LOL, I forgot about Rockapella. Yeah, great group. Great group, man. It's good stuff. All right. Seppuku Art. I have a question for multiple characters in dialogue. I feel I may be adding too much he said, she said at the end of their speech. Any advice? Well, the first rule about he said, she said advice is, just to remember that it's kind of invisible. So when you say he said, she said, the reader just kind of glosses over it. They don't really think about it. So that said, can you say it too much? 100% yes. If after every line you're saying blah, 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 he said, blah, 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 she said, blah, 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 he said. What I think it boils down to is it depends on how many characters are in the scene. If you've got 2 characters in the scene, that's a lot easier because then you can sometimes get away with leaving off a tag every couple lines, especially if your characters are speaking distinctly. So if you've got one character that's got maybe an accent or maybe they use a word that, okay, if the reader hears that, they know that Joe said that, for example, then you can kind of get away with it. Another thing that helps is, when you're talking to people, you're constantly getting interrupted. Let me give you an example. I was talking to all of you. My daughter came in and needed some help with something. All right. So I got interrupted. I had to stop and talk to her for a minute, and then I had to come back. When you're talking to somebody, you're not just standing and talking to them and you say this and then they say this and then you say this and then they say this. You're probably doing something, right? Maybe you're driving in a car. Maybe you're eating dinner. Maybe you're making dinner. Maybe whatever, right? So if you can kind of focus on that and then focus on those interruptions, that makes the dialogue a little bit more organic. And then that gives you things to put in that make it, that help you dilute the he said, she said sort of stuff. So think about that. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. I find that 2 people in a room is always the easiest dialogue to write. Now, if you've got more than 2 people in a room, that's when it starts getting more complicated. Like, for example, I lately, the novels I've been writing, I've been, I don't know why I've been doing this, but I have a lot of characters on stage. Like this last novel I wrote, book 4, The Good Necromancer, there's like 5 characters in a scene. And it just gets insane. And the key there is just to always make sure it's very clear who's speaking. But you almost you have less of that problem because it's not really it's less of a he said, she said thing. And it's more of a, I don't know, Bo said or Lester said or whatever. You have to kind of name the characters. And that can get a little tedious too. But remember, just keep in mind what everyone's doing. If you got more than 2 characters in a scene, they better all be doing something because it gets really hard to, okay, person A said this, person B said that, person C said that. That just gets tedious too. So I guess my power tip or the thing I would focus on is just making sure that the characters are doing something, and that will help you. That'll help you with this problem. Okay. On editing, some of my scenes don't seem to have the emotional impact that they had in my first draft. Like a scene in my first draft literally made me scared, but not so much on editing. Very bad English. I would suggest that that's your mind playing tricks on you. When you're writing something, you're always going to be more emotional in the moment. It's when you step back, you're going to see it differently. So I would not let your mind play tricks on you in that regard. I think if you felt scared while you were writing it, then the chances are pretty high that the readers are going to feel what you felt when you were writing it too. I think when you're editing, the key is to focus on, is my content married with my form? So for example, if if the content that you wrote made you scared, what is it about that content that made you scared? Was it just the idea of it? But then you got to be thinking about, okay, how is this going to make the reader scared? And then you can start thinking about things that matter, like word choice, paragraphing, how you're describing certain things. And you can start in your editing to draw out what it was that made you feel that way in the beginning. So focus instead on not what you think about the work, because you're always going to be the worst judge of your work. Focus instead on, okay, I felt this way when I was drafting it. Is what I'm writing matching how I was feeling? And then if you can connect those things or do the best you can, then hopefully that will connect with the reader. That's how I would think about it. Okay, let's see. Wylan, why do so many of your characters prefer strawberry soda as their go-to beverage? Your book's got me drinking it now. Wylan, I'm only familiar with one character that drinks Actually, no. I think there are two characters that drink strawberry soda. One of them is in my Android X series. My character Shortcut. That's one of my character tags. He's always drinking strawberry soda. And then I think I have in my Magic Tracker series, one of the supporting characters, Darius, likes strawberry soda too. I don't know. I have not. All I know is that there has not been a character that has drank strawberry soda in my books for like 5 years. So now that you said that, Wylan, I might put strawberry soda in one of my next novels. Okay, Adrian, how to overcome revision fatigue. Biggest thing is to take breaks. Take breaks. When I'm doing any kind of heavy revising, I like to try to work for maybe about 30 minutes. And then I take a break and go do dishes or walk my dog or something. And then I come back because it is real. It is a problem. Other tips to help you avoid the revision, like I said earlier, editing and isolation, because then you don't have to focus so much on everything. Another thing that could potentially help you is editing in a different place than where you wrote your book. So if you wrote your book in your room, maybe go to a coffee shop. Just kind of being in a different area, a different space could help you. If you drink caffeine, caffeine can certainly help you. I don't recommend drinking a whole bunch of it, but maybe a cup of coffee while you're editing is not going to hurt. And then just kind of the basic stuff, just making sure that you're getting plenty of exercise and plenty of sleep. Editing when you've gotten lack of or not enough sleep can be problematic. So I would only edit when you're in the right mindset to do it. So if you're feeling tired or you're feeling like physically fatigued, I would suggest that maybe you don't edit, because everything you look at is probably going to look 10 times worse. So just do the best you can to cultivate the right mindset and just try to stay positive while you're doing it. Those would be my tips. All right. Wyland says, yeah, the Netflix Carmen Sandiego is amazing. It's like CS meets Kim Possible. I forgot about Kim Possible. That was a fun show too. Okay, Nicholas, it's really hard to keep it clear for the writer when there are so many people on stage at once. Yes, you are 100% correct. Very difficult to do, and it's something I've been experimenting with, I think, because I've seen so many mega bestsellers do it, and I just wanted to try to see if I could do it myself. Don't know if I succeeded or not, but yeah, it's a skill. But I would argue that it's also a critical skill, because there's a period in every novel, inevitably, where you're going to have multiple people on stage. So being able to juggle people on a stage when you've got a lot of things going on and a lot of characters and competing interests, I think is a critical skill to learn. Let's see. The Cartoon Kid, strawberry soda is the best, and that is facts indeed. Wyland says, I'm pretty sure Cyrus or another character drinks it in my Rat Shifter books. Okay. Maybe I did put that in my Rat Shifter series. Yeah, Cyrus would be the type that would drink strawberry soda. Cyrus was, in a way, kind of inspired a little bit by Shortcut, but yeah, kind of fun. All right. Yeah. Strawberry soda is a fun combo, indeed. Christina says, "Thank you so much for the answer. I've actually wrote one book and it's unpublished." Okay. My bad on the assumption there. So, and then the second comment from Christina is, "This is my second book ever written, and I'm just having a hard time writing it. I want to query it, so I wonder if that's where the pressure is coming from." Um, well, I think you answered your question. Yeah, that's probably where because essentially you're probably not thinking it, but like subconsciously you're thinking, or you're worried about what an agent is going to think. And I think it's really human, because you know I was just actually it's funny you say that, because I was just watching a video yesterday with I think her name is Marissa Peer. She's like the number one therapist in the UK, and she was talking about this very thing, about how when we create, or when we want to do anything, like public speaking is the number one fear that humanity has, public speaking. And it's actually not the fear of public speaking, it's the fear of being rejected. Because there was the time not that long ago, she uses these words, there was a time not that long ago where being rejected from a tribe could be deadly. We humans we're very tribal, and we have to find people, or long time ago we had to find people that were like us and who accepted us. And if we got rejected by a tribe or banished from a tribe, then we could die. And in some ways we still kind of do that as humans. We still try to banish people and cancel people, but I guess it's a little bit different. You don't necessarily die if you get canceled, but I think we still have that fear. And the good thing is that if you get rejected, it's not the end of the world, especially if an agent doesn't want to read your manuscript or doesn't want to accept your manuscript. But yeah, I maybe think that could be where it's coming from, Christina. And the question I would ask is, if no agent accepts it, is the manuscript still enough? My answer to you is that it is. And you may want to think about self-publishing. Just remember that just because 10 people across the world don't want to read the book or don't want to accept the book doesn't mean that the book is not adequate. And just remember that just because there's some agent that doesn't accept it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a reader that won't. So just keep that in perspective, and good luck. All right. Thank you for the congratulations, everybody. Seppuku Art says, I plan on recording my novels. What microphone do you recommend? I don't recommend this one. Let me put it that way. This is a great microphone. I like it. It's just a little on the quiet side for me. I don't. There's things about this microphone I don't like. This is a Scarlett. This is not a Scarlett. This is an Audio Technica AT2032. Great microphone for podcasting. If I had to do it again, I would buy a Shure SMB57. That is the mic that you see everybody use. My buddy Dale Roberts, I think, just got one or has had one for a while. It's the radio announcer podcaster microphone. But the great thing about it is that it's a dynamic microphone. This one is a condenser mic. I would not buy a condenser mic for audiobook production. Huge mistake on my part. But I think they run you about a couple $100 these days. But yeah, I would get a dynamic mic that'll just be better for you, and I would get like a SMB 57, or there's some other ones that are good too. I know some folks are using Blue Yetis. That's a little brave. That's kind of brave. If you can get a Blue Yeti to swing it, maybe. But I think a Blue Yeti would be tough. I would get a professional podcasting mic, and spend the money to do it. It's one of those things where you can do it with bootleg stuff, but spend the money because it's just going to make a difference in the long run. And remember that audiobooks are a permanent medium. So you don't really want to create an audiobook that's going to go out there and, you're going to cringe every time you hear it. You want to try to do the best you can to create good materials. And half the battle is the equipment. The other half of the battle is your technique. So your technique is equally, if not more important, because learning how to take the right breaths, to kind of juke away from the microphone when you have to, when you're doing certain things, how close you need to be to the microphone. All of that is equally as important as your gear. And frankly, I think there are probably some narrators out there that would say that your technique is actually more important. So, yeah, SMB 57B or whatever, you can look it up. That's probably what I would recommend. All right, Wylan, will we ever see more of X and Shortcut? The Android X trilogy stands high on my all-time favorites. So does Galaxy Mavericks. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've played around with the idea of giving Shortcut his own series. It's always been something I wanted to do, and there's some more I want to do with X at some point and Jaslyn, but it just kind of depends. It's one of those weird things. It's like I want to return to this series, but it's like, man, I'm so much of a better writer than I was when I wrote that series. So it's like, will they be radically different? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but yeah, I do want to write a series. It was going to be called Android Shortcut, but we'll see. We'll see. Wylan, if I do it, you'll be the first to know. Okay. Adrian, how do I find free writing groups, critique partners, and beta readers of your genre? Well, I would start with like a Goodreads. Goodreads is a good place to start, and then ask around. I mean, find other self-published writers in your genre and see if they're willing to work with you. I've never heard of a paid writing group. I mean, I guess there are paid coaches out there, but you guys know how I feel about coaches. Critique partners, yeah. I mean, I think I would start with someone who's in your genre, who's maybe on the same level as you, maybe somebody that's got just a few books or maybe no books. I mean, it just kind of depends on where you are on your journey, and ask if they're willing to trade manuscripts back and forth. The thing is, though, and this kind of gets back to the motivation piece, is when I started writing, I did do some of the critique groups and things, and I just walked away disgusted from critique groups because I just didn't find them helpful personally. They were nice people, but they just didn't understand what I was trying to do with my career, and you have to be wary of that. I think it's easy to join writing groups with people that maybe they have different aspirations with their writing. There's a lot of people who will just never do more with their writing than they're doing now, and that's cool. If that's you and you're on that level, then that's probably your tribe. But if you're trying to be a successful author and you're with a critique group or a writing group of people that they don't care about becoming successful authors, or they're stuck in self-doubt, then you're really not going to go anywhere. You're just going to kind of go in circles. And the other issue is writing by committee is not a way to write. So if you give your manuscript to somebody or a group of people and they give you all this feedback, well, now you've just invited all these people into your creative space. And I don't know. I'm a big fan of keeping that space sacred. You guys very, very rarely ever see any early draft work from me. I just don't do it. And if I do it, it's probably behind a paywall, because I want to make sure that the people who do see something like that are not going to be pessimistic or anything like that. So I don't share early versions of my work for that reason. I release the work when it's done. And when you work with a critique group, there's always that risk that when you invite those people in, they shape the work in ways that can actually hurt the work. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the critique group, but I am saying that you have to find the right people. And finding the right people boils down to, one, do they have the same aspirations and goals as you as a writer? Two, do they have the same worldview? Meaning, if you're pro self-publishing, are they pro self-publishing? If you're pro this, are they pro that? I mean, that's kind of critical. And then the last piece is, are they going to give you feedback that is constructive, or is their goal to just tear everything that they see down? Because there's always that one person in a critique group. That's another reason I don't do critique groups. So find your people is my answer. All right. Okay. Seppuku Art, what is your favorite novel or series so far that you wrote? I don't really have a favorite series. I think I get asked this question all the time, and I think my answer is different. There's always a space in my heart for every series that I write, um, and the main reason for that is because when I write my series, I put every inch of my being into them, and then when I publish them, I kind of forget them. Like Wyland was asking me, about my Android X series. Like I remember the characters, but I don't remember what happens in the series. Like I it's kind of a maybe it's my superpower. I just completely push it out of my brain and forget what it's about and what the stakes are. So every series I think has a special place in my heart, and I'm not. I don't know. I don't have a favorite. There are some series that I think I like. There's one character like my last Dragon Lord series. Every series I've written after that, you always see a black dragon in some form or fashion in every series that I've written ever since. It's, I don't know, like an Easter egg or something, but like there's always a black dragon cameo or something. And even in series that don't have the dragons, I mean, I have one character in my Rat Shifter series. Um, my main character's sister, she's got a black dragon tattoo. You know, my character Lester in my Good Necromancer series has a black dragon air freshener. So I don't know. It's just kind of a fun little Easter egg little thing that I do. But yeah, I love all my series, and I know it's a cop out answer. All right, Adrienne, who's your favorite author? I have a few favorite authors. Ray Bradbury is always at the top of my list. I'm a big fan of Michael Crichton. I like Dean Koontz a lot too, and trying to think of some others. Ken Follett, everything I've read from him has been great. I like Nora Roberts a lot too. I mean, just in terms of like mega bestsellers. Jim Butcher, anything he reads, I tend to, or anything he writes, I tend to read. I'm trying to think of a few others. Yeah, I mean, I read pretty wide ranging. So, but those are the ones that come to mind. I've got probably a bigger list that I could probably release. But I almost exclusively these days study the mega bestsellers, and the reason for that is because they're the best. They're the best operators of the English language writing right now, and by reading them, I feel like I can learn a lot. All right, Wyland says, I don't mind if having a newer style if you write more in the Android X series. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah, maybe that'll entice me to come back to it at some point. You're not the first person that's asked. I get emails on this series regularly. So, yeah. Seppuku art. Yeah. So the Dragon series. Yeah, maybe it's my favorite. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I haven't written it yet. I don't know. We'll see. So, well, all right, folks. That's at the end of the questions here. Great power hour. Great questions. I always love answering your questions. So Saturday, April 2nd, we'll be back. And don't forget, folks, if you want to watch the replay, feel free to do so. So have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you next time. Perfect.